He's already dead. Hanju smiled. Chu Shaoqi looked up at him in surprise. Grandpa, you killed him? No, it was you. He was already dead when I arrived. He should have suffered from chi deviation and forcefully possessed someone. He died by his own hands. I see. Then I killed him. Ha ha ha, I set him up to suffer from chi deviation. Chu Shaoqi turned to look at Tang Wan, who was walking over from not far away. He smiled proudly and said, Warner, I was acting earlier to make him let down his guard. Tang Wan nodded. I believe you're crying, but I don't think you can pee your pants for an act. I can't do it, anyway. Chu Shaoqi was embarrassed and did not know how to refute. Tang Wan took the initiative to bow to Hanju. She introduced herself a little nervously. Hanju smiled kindly, but with his appearance, his smile was not kind but gentle. Tang Wan blushed. Chu Shaoqi widened his eyes and shouted, Damn it, Warner, don't tell me you want to be my grandmother. That won't do. What nonsense are you saying? Tang Wan was furious. She naturally didn't fall in love with Hanju at first sight. However, he was so handsome and unfathomable, so she naturally couldn't face him casually. Hanju said angrily, Don't go around acknowledging your grandmother. Your grandmother just left not long ago. She might be eavesdropping from somewhere. Be careful she doesn't deal with you. Hearing this, Chu Shaoqi hurriedly jumped up and looked around, kowtowing in different directions. Tang Wan rolled her eyes. This fellow was very imposing when he was serious, but he was usually very unreasonable. He was simply a freak. Hanju smiled. All right, don't cause trouble. Rest well. There won't be any danger nearby for the time being. Chu Shaoqi stood up and nodded excitedly. It felt good to survive. For the next period of time, Hanju sat by the river. Tang Wan and Chu Shaoqi cultivated not far away and occasionally practiced their spells. Tang Wan was very curious about Hanju. She asked how they met when the two of them went out to find herbs. After knowing the process of their encounter, Tang Wan felt that Hanju must be an expert. That green-robed Taoist had definitely died in Hanju's hands. However, Chu Shaoqi did not think of this. This fellow was really naive. In the blink of an eye, more than half a year passed. Chu Shaoqi was worried that the sect would find them and suggested that they change locations. Hanju had no objections to this. To him, it didn't matter where he went. He couldn't be bothered to argue with them. Just like that, Hanju and Chu Shaoqi embarked on the path of the world again, but with one more person this time. Chu Shaoqi and Tang Wan flew on their swords, while Hanju rode a cloud as usual. This method surprised Tang Wan. Wasn't that the legendary immortal? Tang Wan was even more respectful towards Hanju. Several months later, the three of them arrived at a villa. The nearby mountains were steep and no one could be seen within 1,000 miles. It was like a paradise. However, there was no one in this villa. Tang Wan felt that this place was sinister and did not dare to walk alone. She kept following Chu Shaoqi, but he did not care. With his grandfather around, Chu Shaoqi felt that he wouldn't be afraid even if the sky collapsed. Hanju felt that this place was not bad and agreed to stay. It was a good opportunity to increase Chu Shaoqi's cultivation. As night fell, Tang Wan did not dare to stay alone. She found Chu Shaoqi, and the two of them stayed in the same room. Tang Wan was at the Foundation establishment realm, after all, but she still felt uneasy entering this place. The two of them were not mortals and did not need to sleep. They cultivated together. However, every night, they could hear the faint cries of women and children. This made Tangwan even more nervous, and Chu Shaoqi could not remain calm. He was a Golden Core Realm cultivator. How strong were ghosts that even he could not see? He was indeed very strong. Hanju predicted that even if a nascent soul realm cultivator came to this villa, they would also die. The person who slaughtered this villa was at the Tribulation Transcendence realm and captured all the adult men here. The consequences of his spell were to make the evil ghosts stronger. The ghosts here absorbed the essence of the sun and moon every day and became stronger all the time. The reason they didn't hurt them was naturally because of Hanju. He planned to let Chu Shaoqi deal with these ghosts as an exam after he became stronger. On this day, Hanju was cultivating when a line of words appeared in front of him. The formless transcendent deity sent you a dream. Do you accept? With Hanju's cultivation, the Tao creator shouldn't be able to visit him in his dreams, but he still lowered his status and gave the formless transcendent deity the right. The formless transcendent deity was now the overseer of the endless era, the most powerful existence on the surface. The dream was a blank domain. The formless transcendent deity bowed respectfully and asked, Creation Lord, are there requirements towards future Tao creators? Hanju said, there's no need to restrict. For example, Han Huang, Han Ling, the primordial ancestor god, the ultimate god of punishment, and the other top great Tao. I observed the future and discovered that a calamity for Tao creators might appear in the future. It might be related to the ultimate evil chaotic devil. The formless transcendent deity continued. After the ultimate evil chaotic devil was chased out of the chaos, he actually disappeared mysteriously. Hanju couldn't deduce it. He guessed that it was related to let the Fusong divine tree supervise the future, Hanju replied, deciding the Fusong tree's status. The formless transcendent deity nodded, not daring to refute. He hesitated for a moment and then asked, recently, Han Yi has been destroying the great Tao worlds everywhere to increase his cultivation. Do I have to do anything about him? Hanju said, aren't you unaffected by karma? Let nature take its course. Don't interfere with things below your level. The endless era is a brand new era. Even I don't know what kind of danger will appear in the future. Let all living beings be vigilant. Understood. After the dream ended, Hanju looked at Han Yi. This kid was indeed a little bloodthirsty. Furthermore, the direction he traveled would coincidentally bump into this world. According to his calculations, Han Yi would arrive in this world in at most 100 million years. His descendants couldn't be bullied, but he couldn't let him mess around. Hanju suddenly had an idea and smiled. In the blank domain, large worlds were dotted with pale white. Han Yi, who was surrounded by blood qi, meditated in the void. His entire body trembled very frequently and his state was extremely wrong. At this moment, Han Yi was in a dream. In his dream, a blurry mysterious figure kept suppressing him, making him very angry. Han Yi woke up from his dream after fighting for a long time. This was not the first time he had such a dream. Every time he cultivated and entered a state, he would be tied down by such a nightmare. Most importantly, he could not deduce the karma of this dream. Could it be because I've killed too many people, causing negative karma and grudges? Han Yi frowned, but his innate great creation was the ultimate killing star. He had relied on killing to grow to this day. If he was asked to give up, it was equivalent to cutting off his right arm. I have to resolve this dream. Otherwise, I won't be able to cultivate in the future and can only kill, Han Yi muttered to himself. He stood up and continued his plan. Since he couldn't find the problem, he would continue killing. One day, he would find the fellow in his dream and kill him to eliminate future trouble. Somewhere in the blank domain, thousands of worlds surrounded a huge palace like stars. It was the Creation Emperor Court. After the great Tao immeasurable calamity ended, the status of the Creation Emperor Court soared. Now, it was already one of the most famous holy lands in the Endless Era. The Emperor was even given the responsibility of controlling the order of the Endless Era. The current Creation Emperor Court had absorbed many mighty figures, including Tao Sovereign, Zhao Shenyuan, Jiang Yi, Lao Dan, Li Daokong, and other ancient gods who had left behind legends in the great Tao immeasurable calamity. From the perspective of a great Tao sage, 100 million years was not long, but to all living beings, existences below the sage realm, 100 million years was already the alternation of several eras. Inside the hall, Han Yao and Han Bahen faced Han Ling. They were alone. Han Ling wore an exquisite and holy robe with countless jades hanging on it. The jades reflected small worlds. The divine light on her head shone with a strong light and covered most of her face. Only her mouth could be seen. Just her mouth was enough to make people appear to control Han Yi. If this continues, our Creation Emperor Court's reputation will be sullied by him. After the great Tao immeasurable calamity ended, although Han Yi was still in the Creation Emperor Court, his relationship with the primordial chaos was clearly closer. It was mainly the primordial chaos with Han Huang. There were 3 primordial chaos in the Endless Era. They were each on their own side and were very far away. Their relationship was subtle. Han Huang was the most famous. In the great Tao immeasurable calamity, his contributions were higher than the Emperor of the Creation Emperor Court. Han Ling said, he has already fallen into his own calamity. Don't worry. Just watch. Han Yao asked in surprise, what calamity is it? Life and death calamity. Han Yao frowned. Han Bahen was the same. Although they were unhappy with Han Yi, they still had a close relationship. They were also members of the clan. How could they see Han Yi die? You don't have to care about this. I have something to tell you, Han Ling continued, ignoring their turbulent emotions. Formless World has opened the Tao mystic realm. I hope that the various factions can enter a mortal world. Every faction can only enter one mortal world. The cultivation level of the mortal world cannot surpass the deity realm. Its goal is to unite the Endless Era and for the various factions to establish a certain connection. The choice of this world is chosen by Han Yao. Han Bahen, go to the Tao mystic realm and gather information in advance. Contact Han Yao at any time, she instructed. Han Yi and Han Bahen accepted the order and left. As the sun shone brightly, the huge villa was filled with boundless mist. In a courtyard, Chu Xiaoqi was cultivating a spell. He was cultivating the transformation technique. Tang Wan was feeding a huge golden eagle. It was Chu Xiaoniao. Chu Xiaoniao had always been in a free-range state and had only found them recently. This made Chu Xiaoqi very happy. He had even forgotten about this fellow. He didn't expect it to find him. Little did he know that Chu Xiaoniao was not looking for him, but Hanju. Chu Xiaoniao already had intelligence. Hanju had once taught it and it had benefited greatly. All these years, it had wandered around and discovered that it was too weak to be a demon king, so it followed Chu Xiaoqi's aura to cultivate. Of course, Chu Xiaoniao didn't show this. At this moment, a figure flew out from the clouds. This person had disheveled hair and looked to be in his 50s or 60s. He wore a gorgeous black robe and had a powerful aura. His gaze landed on Chu. Kid, I've finally found you. So you're hiding in this ferocious land. You're courting death. Chu and Tang Wan looked up, and their expressions changed drastically. Sect Master. Tang Wan's expression turned defeated. Chu was on high alert as he shouted. Old man Chinsu, don't be arrogant. My grandfather is here. You're courting death if you dare to attack me. Daoist Chinsu didn't capture Hanju's aura and guessed that Chu was bluffing. He smiled disdainfully and said, could it be that your grandfather is a wandering ghost here? Chu snorted. My grandfather is an immortal. Your illegitimate son has done all sorts of evil and harmed so many fellow disciples. As the sect master, you didn't stop him. You deserve to die. Today, I'll let the immortal uphold justice. Ridiculous. Daoist Chinsu's anger was instantly ignited. He had many illegitimate children, but the son Chu killed was the most talented. He still wanted to send that illegitimate child to a larger sect to exchange for pills that could break through a higher realm. Unfortunately, all of this was ruined by this brat. Daoist Chinsu waved his right hand and a figure landed in front of Chu. It was the corpse of a handsome man. Chu eyelids twitched. He suddenly realized that something was wrong. The other party was not only here to kill him. Today, you have to die for my son. My son will revive with your death. Daoist Chinsu said coldly. He took out a white ruler and pressed it down. In an instant, a terrifying pressure descended, causing Chu and Tang Wan to vomit blood and kneel on the ground. The courtyard collapsed and the fog in all directions dispersed. Daoist Chinsu was about to cast a spell when he suddenly saw a figure that made his pupils constrict. After the clouds dispersed, he saw a figure sitting on the roof of the Daoist temple next door. He actually did not sense it. Now, even when he saw the other party, his divine sense did not capture his aura. It was as if this person did not exist and he was only hallucinating. There's really an immortal? Daoist Chinsu had such a ridiculous thought. He was about to speak when Hanju opened his eyes and glanced over with a cold gaze. Before Daoist Chinsu could see his eyes clearly, his body was instantly petrified. He fell and smashed into the courtyard that had turned into ruins. He shattered, causing rubble to scatter all over the ground. Chu was dumbfounded. Tang Wan was also in disbelief. What happened? Chu Xiaoniao shivered in fear. Hanju's voice floated over, I wonder when. You can rely on yourself to resolve all the trouble. Oh my god! Grandpa! Your F-Xin Hawking strong! Chu came back to his senses and exclaimed. He immediately jumped to Hanju's side and started to flatter him. Tang Wan looked at the rubble ahead and swallowed. A soul formation realm cultivator died just like that? How was that possible? Even the legendary Mahayana cultivator couldn't kill a soul formation realm cultivator without attacking, right? This method was beyond Tang Wan's imagination. Grandpa, what mystical power was that just now? Teach me. 11. Grandpa, you're definitely at the Mahayana realm, right? Have you surpassed the Mahayana realm? Can immortals descend into the mortal world? Chu shook Hanju's arm and kept asking questions. Hanju was helpless. Only this kid dared to be so rude. If it was Han Huang, Han Tua, and Han Yunjin, he would directly slap them. I can't tell you my cultivation level for now. You're not qualified to know. Cultivate well. Hanju interrupted Chu and chased him out. Tang Wan sighed. Are you really his grandson? How can an immortal love mortals so much? Chpter scratched his head. I saw it with my own eyes when my grandfather was buried. It can't be fake. Could it be an ancestor? It's really possible. After all, we're both handsome and of the same lineage. How shameless are you? Tangwan rolled her eyes. She felt that Hanju was the most handsome man she had ever seen, and Chpter was the most shameless man she had ever seen. It was all reflected on her face. Chpter chuckled. In any case, he's my biological grandfather. I'm certain of this. Who could threaten him in the future with such powerful backing? Chpter was overjoyed. He had already imagined a beautiful future. After Daoist Chinsu died, no one from the sect came to hunt him down. The cultivation days in the villa became more leisurely. Time. The two of them didn't know what fortuitous encounter they had encountered, but they clearly felt their improvement. Although that was the case, it was still within their acceptable range. After all, this was an immortal. 20 years passed quickly. Chpter had reached the nascent soul realm, and Tangwan had reached the golden core realm. She was not far from the nascent soul realm. Such cultivation speed was definitely top-notch in the mortal world. It was even faster than the top prodigies in this mortal world. The two of them did not realize this. On this day, Tangwan found Hanju. He already treated her as his granddaughter-in-law and would occasionally chat with her, so the two of them were not distant. Tangwan sat beside him and said in distress, "Brother Shaoqi looks different. Or rather, he has no feelings for me at all." Hanju smiled. "You two are fated. The reason he didn't tell you his feelings is that he's still waiting." Waiting for what? Waiting for more women. Humph, it's indeed like his style. Previously, he always peeped at the other female disciples in the sect. Then, you have to capture him well. I can't. Discover new Tories at NVUBIN. CO force the two of you to be together. Although there's marriage, it's difficult to decide. Even you can't predict it? I can, but I can't reveal the heavenly secrets. Fine. Tangwan sighed. The two of them were like grandfather and granddaughter as they chatted. After being enlightened by Hanju, Tang Wan's bad mood was swept away and she happily went back to Cultivate. Hanju looked at her back and sighed. To be able to be distracted by love, this was human nature. How interesting. He had already lost this ability, so he missed it. The villa was pleasant and had beautiful mountains and rivers. It was like a paradise in was peace, but in the Dao field, he was just sitting there. From time to time, new phenomena and new living beings would appear in this forest. There were always changes throughout the year. Hanju suddenly felt the world moving. At this moment, a figure appeared in the universe outside. He raised this mortal world with one hand and walked out of the universe. The current endless era was divided into the Great Tao World, the Great World, and the Little World. The Great Tao World contained countless worlds, and every world was like a universe, containing myriad worlds. So it was done by Formless World. He wanted to contact all the Great Tao worlds and establish a neutral land. Other than giving the juniors a chance to join powerful factions, it was also to strengthen himself. In the eyes of the various factions, it was not a loss to only produce one mortal world. They could even form a formless world. Formless World was not taking advantage of him for nothing. He had to use all his resources to develop the Tao mystic realm and control the mortal worlds to affect the various great Tao worlds. It required a long time and endless resources to nurture so many mortal worlds. Coincidentally, this world was chosen. It was just nice to be a stage for Chu Xiaoqi. He calculated that it would take 5,000 years for this mortal world to fuse with the Tao mystic realm. When he reached the Tao mystic realm, he still had to wait for a period of time. 5,000 years was enough for Chu Xiaoqi to accumulate considerable strength. Hanju felt that Chu Xiaoqi still lacked the personality of an expert. He thought for a moment and sent a dream to someone. Several days later, a man passed through the clouds and arrived at the villa. Chu Xiaoqi and Tang Wan felt the terrifying aura and walked out of the house, looking up. A handsome man in purple divine armor stood in the void. He looked around and suddenly saw Hanju. He immediately knelt down and bowed. Chu Xiaoqi and Tang Wan were stunned. The armored man seemed to sense them. Then, he landed in front of Chu Xiaoqi and said, "From today onwards, I'll teach you cultivation." This person was Han Tuo. Han Tuo sized up Chu Xiaoqi expressionlessly. He was a little glad. He did not expect his second brother to have a son. Chu Xiaoqi asked nervously, "Who are you?" Tang Wan said in a low voice, "Don't you think he looks very similar to Grandpa?" Han Tuo said, "That's right. The grandfather you're talking about is my father, my biological father." Chu Xiaoqi's eyes lit up. He immediately went forward and rubbed his hands to please him. "Then you're my uncle." He had tried to pull strings, but he did not expect it to work so well. Han Tuo said, "I will teach you for 100 years. Not only cultivation but also fighting." All right. It'll be tough. I'm not afraid of suffering." Han Tuo nodded in satisfaction. Chu Xiaoqi added, "Count her in." He pointed at Tang Wan. Han Tuo shook his head. "My cultivation technique is not suitable for women." Chu Xiaoqi was convinced by Han Tuo's appearance. Such a figure was definitely a very powerful cultivator. He looked forward to his teaching, but in less than a day, he regretted it. At the back of the villa, Han Tuo established a barrier independently. The internal space was larger than the entire mortal world. Although Chu Xiaoqi was surprised, he did not realize how big the space inside this barrier was. Chu Xiaoqi lay in the ruins, panting heavily. His clothes were ragged and he was covered in blood. He was in an extremely miserable state. He looked at the high and mighty Han Tuo, his eyes filled with despair. "Uncle, can you stop? I'm not your uncle. We're enemies now. The enemy won't let you rest in a battle of life and death. But I've used up all my spirit energy." Han Tuo attacked Chu Xiaoqi again. The power was extremely terrifying. Chu Xiaoqi felt that if he did not dodge, he might really die. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and dodge. After 7 days, Chu Xiaoqi finally came out of the barrier. He dragged his injured body as he went to find Hanju. Tang Wan covered her mouth when she saw him, but she didn't say anything. After all, the one who taught Chu Xiaoqi was Hanju's biological son. He was trustworthy. Chu Xiaoqi came in front of Hanju and cried. This time, Hanju's heart didn't soften. He didn't let him off no matter how much he pleaded. Chu Xiaoqi left helplessly. Then, Han Tuo came to visit him respectfully. He didn't dare to be as unreasonable as Chu Xiaoqi. Facing Hanju, he still felt distant because he was experienced and knew how strong his father was. Hanju began to preach the Tao. The father and son didn't need to exchange pleasantries. It was more realistic to directly preach the Tao. He used the power of time, making this lecture independent of time. Only a few days had passed when Han Tuo finished listening to the Tao. Han Tuo found Chu Shaoqi again and ignored his resistance. He carried the kid into the barrier. Tang Wan was a little worried about Chu Shaoqi, so she found Han Ju. Seeing that she couldn't change this matter, she could only give up. This time, Chu Shaoqi stayed in the barrier for a long time. Of course, he was forced to do it. One day, Xing Hongxian returned. She entered Hanju's residence and pounced into his arms. She acted coquettishly like Chu Shaoqi and talked about what she had seen and heard during this period of time. Hanju listened patiently. In the end, Xing Hongxian asked him about his plan for Chu Shaoqi. Calling Han Tuo over was enough to show how much he valued this kid. Chu Shaoqi was her only grandson, so she naturally had to care. Xing Hongxian frowned in joy. Aren't you going to tell Huang about this? No need. That kid is busy building his primordial chaos. Besides, he might not have this son in his heart at all. But if that's the case, this father and son will. Huang also needs to be corrected, Hanju said meaningfully. If he nurtured other descendants to surpass Han Huang, this fellow would only be angry. However, if it was a son who he was guilty towards, that would be a different story. Xing Hongxian smiled. I think you just dote on Shaoqi. How can you be so unreasonable? That's right, I dote on him. As the master of the endless era, do I need to worry about anything when I dote on someone? Yes, yes, yes. You're the best. I'm going to bring Tang Wan away. Her potential is too poor. She won't be able to keep up with Shaoqi. Sooner or later. Kid to work hard. You're really something. Xing Hongxian also found it interesting and even began to look forward to Chu Shaoqi's reaction. That day, she found Tang Wan and showed her ability. Tang Wan was pleasantly surprised and immediately acknowledged her as her master. When Xing Hongxian suggested bringing her away and not seeing Chu Shaoqi for a long time, she immediately panicked and hesitated. Ever since her brother died, Chu Shaoqi had been her only family. Furthermore, she had always loved him as he always protected her. How could she abandon him for opportunities? Forget it. I can't leave him. Tang Wan sighed and her eyes became firm. For the sake of love, giving up longevity was undoubtedly a huge determination. She could also tell that Hanju only cared about Chu Shaoqi. She was only a side character. Xing Hongxian smiled. Cultivators can live for more than 1,000 years or 10,000 years. As the difference in your cultivation levels increases, you won't be able to keep up with him sooner or later. She waved her right hand, and a memory surged into Tang Wan's mind. The difference between life and death. This memory was very short. There were no words, but silence was better than words. When Tang Wan woke up, she was deeply stimulated and sweat broke out on her forehead. After struggling for a long time, she finally agreed and followed Xing Hongxian to Cultivate. Half a year later, Chu Shaoqi finally came out of the barrier. This time, he seemed to have been reborn. He was like an unsheathed sword, revealing its sharpness. This time, he didn't look for Hanju but Tang Wan. However, he only found a jade slip in her house. He injected spirit energy and a shadow appeared. It was Tang Wan. Brother Shaoqi, I'll have already left when you see this letter. I've obtained the favor of an immortal. She wants to bring me to the immortal world to cultivate. Actually, I've always liked you. but you don't seem to like me enough. I didn't want to leave you at first, but then I saw the future. Without opportunities, I can't keep up with you. You'll still be young when I die. I don't want this. I want to walk side by side with you. Tang Wan's eyes turned red as she continued. I have to cultivate and catch up to you. However, my only regret is that I don't know if you like me. Grandpa said that we are fated. But are we really? Brother Xiaoqi, see you in the future. We will definitely meet as long as you don't forget me. Tang Wan's shadow dissipated. Chu Xiaoqi stood in front of the table and remained silent. Several days passed, but Chu Xiaoqi did not leave Tang Wan's room. Han Tuo sat at the edge of the cliff as his thoughts drifted. He also thought of the most important woman in his life. His old friend. He could revive that person, but he felt that it would only be a shell, not the true person. Some people and some things could be placed in his memories. Half a month later, Chu Xiaoqi finally came out. He still didn't look for Han Zhu or ask if the immortal who took Tang Wan away was related to his grandfather. He directly found Han Tuo and continued cultivating. They entered the barrier again. Han Zhu walked out of the house and stood in the courtyard, enjoying the sunlight. He smiled. Since he had nothing to do, he stretched and checked his emails. Soon, he saw a noteworthy email. Your disciple Ji Xianshen has crossed the origin spacetime. His karma has been severed. Han Zhu opened his friends list. Ji Xianshen's portrait was still there. He was not dead. However, he observed the endless era and couldn't find Ji Xianshen at all. He couldn't even find the past or the future, including his own past. Han Zhu's cultivation was outstanding, so he could still remember Ji Xianshen. However, other than him, everyone had forgotten about him, including the hidden sect disciples. It was as if Ji Xianshen had never existed in the world. Interesting. Origin spacetime. Han Zhu wanted to visit him in his dreams, but he couldn't. He couldn't find Ji Xianshen at all. He had no choice but to use the system's derivation function. I want to know Ji Xianshen's location. Unable to derive its karma. Can't be found in the blank domain. Interesting. Does Ji Xianshen have a chance to surpass me? Although he was a disciple, people would change. He still had to be wary. If he couldn't save him, he had to be careful if the other party would benefit from a disaster and surpass him. If there was hope, Han Zhu would not curse Ji Xianshen. He would only cultivate harder. If he encountered Ji Xianshen in the future, he would face him with extreme caution. 600 trillion years of lifespan will be deducted. Do you want to continue? Continue. Forever impossible. To reach the Creator. Lord Realm, one has to surpass the primordial Fian Celestial's potential. The origin. Spacetime doesn't have such an opportunity or possibility. Han Zhu was relieved. His system was formed by the blank domain consciousness. It was equivalent to the greatest opportunity of the blank domain. It was nurtured by countless predecessors, and it was very difficult for anyone to catch up to him. However, Han Zhu still didn't let down his guard. Just because Ji Xianshen couldn't, it didn't mean that others couldn't. He did not ask the system if there was a possibility of him being surpassed. He was afraid that the answer would be impossible to surpass. Han Zhu didn't want to relax. Origin space-time? Han Zhu had an idea. He immediately created. Then, he continued reading the emails. Sect. Some disciples began to have conflicts. This was like fighting for a country. When fighting, everyone was united. Once they unified the world, they began to fight for power. Hanju couldn't forcefully stop this situation. Even if he was enslaved by the ultimate origin heavenly prison, he was loyal to Hanju and not absolutely kind to others. Hanju let it pass. Every family had their own difficulties. He would let them fight among themselves. For the next period of time, Chu Shaoqi immersed himself in the barrier as if he had gone mad. He stayed inside for 80 years. 80 years later, Chu Shaoqi walked out of the barrier and came to visit him. His appearance did not change, but his body was clearly much stronger. There was a murderous aura between his brows. All these years, his cultivation level had almost not increased, but his strength had changed drastically. The first thing Chu Shaoqi said when he saw him was, "Grandpa, when can I see Warner?" This kid was not stupid and guessed who the mastermind was, but he didn't beg Hanju to let them meet because he knew that this was the best path for them. Hanju said, "You will naturally see her. When the time is right. Marriage requires your own efforts, not waiting." Chu Shaoqi was deep in thought. He suddenly grinned and said, "I'll cultivate. For 1,000 years first. During this period of time, find a few hundred concubines to play with. This girl is easily jealous, so I can't let her discover it." That he was changing the topic. Chu Shaoqi didn't have a chance to find any mistresses. Now, "Grandpa, what's your son's name?" All these years, when I asked him, he didn't answer. "He's really strong. Is he a Mahayana cultivator?" Chu Shaoqi asked expectantly. Now, he admired Han Tuo the most. All these years of cultivation made him unable to imagine what Han Tuo had experienced. Hanju smiled. He will say it when he needs to. But he's leaving. Fine. Chu Shaoqi sighed. He was indeed too weak. Otherwise, his brother wouldn't have died and he and Tang Wan wouldn't have been hunted down. Outside the door, Han Tuo bowed to Hanju and directly jumped out of this great Dao world. At this moment, with Chu Shaoqi's speed, it would take countless billions of years to arrive. Hanju asked, "What do you plan to do next? Continue cultivating or go out and adventure?" Chu Shaoqi thought for a moment and then said, "Cultivate. Although I'm already very strong, I'm not invincible in the world. Being by your side is the greatest opportunity in the world. Why run around?" Chu Shaoqi smiled proudly and started to massage Hanju's back and shoulders. No matter how old he was, he would always be that youth in front of him. The grandfather and grandson chatted for a while before Chu Shaoqi went to cultivate. Hanju also continued cultivating. To the current him, cultivating was the same no matter the place. After reaching the Creator Lord realm, he no longer needed to cultivate. The cultivation technique Hanju taught Chu Shaoqi was enough for him to cultivate to the Mahayana realm, so he didn't disturb Hanju in the following days. Years passed. Spring and autumn alternated. Things changed in the world. The villa stood in seclusion. 500 years passed quickly. Chu Shaoqi was transcending the Mahayana through realm tribulation and was preparing to break to the loose immortal realm. He was extremely nervous as he faced this tribulation. As long as he succeeded, he could ascend to the immortal world and find Tang Wan. He was also a little nervous. Would she still like him after getting used to the situation in the immortal world? These hundreds of years were very short for Hanju, but they were torturous to Chu Shaoqi. How many days and nights had he missed her? In the past, when Tang Wan was by his side, he did not like her. But he missed her now that she was gone. Hanju walked out to the courtyard and looked at Chu transcending the tribulation. Although Chu was nervous, Chu already guessed that he could successfully transcend it. Indeed, 49 days later, Chu became a loose immortal. A pillar of light descended from the sky and covered him. It broke through the sky and pulled him up. Chu turned to look at the villa. After reaching the Mahayana realm, he could see countless ghosts hidden in the villa. They were all suppressed under the villa by the mysterious dermic powers. No wonder he felt that it was sinister back then. There were really ghosts here. So it was Grandpa who was protecting them. Chu shouted, "Grandpa, I'm about to ascend. See you in the immortal world in the future." The power of ascension was too strong. He could not stop at all and was forcefully ascended. "Grandpa, I'll always remember you. I'll definitely be filial to you if I have the chance. In the future." Chu continued to shout, his voice resounding through the sky. At this moment, Hanju's voice floated up. "In that case, don't ascend.